"Miracles for $1, the little black girl announced. The millionaire chuckled, right up until the impossible happened. The heat clung to the street like a heavy blanket, and the city moved around her in a restless rhythm. Cars honking, shoes slapping against the pavement, voices weaving into one constant hum. Right there on the edge of the sidewalk sat a tiny booth, crooked and tired, brushed with clumsy strokes of paint. Miracles for $1. A girl, barely 8, sat behind it. Her dress, some pale, once pretty thing, had been washed to the point where the colors had almost given up. Her neatly braided hair was held together by cheap little bands, and her hands stayed folded neatly in front of her as she watched people hurry by. Most didn't spare her a glance. A few snickered under their breath, calling it childish nonsense. Some outright laughed, amused at the idea that a kid thought she could trade miracles for pocket change. But she didn't waver. She didn't shrink. She simply sat there, back straight, eyes calm, as though she knew exactly who she was waiting for. And eventually he appeared, rolling toward her in a wheelchair. His suit looked like money, perfectly cut, soft gray fabric catching every bit of sunlight. His shoes shined like mirrors, and the heavy gold on his wrist flashed each time he pushed his wheelchair forward. He rolled up to the little stand and settled back with a smug, entertained smirk. His voice carried, sharp enough for half the street to hear. $1 miracles? He mocked, laughing loudly. Who actually falls for this? The girl lifted her gaze to him, quiet and steady, offering not a single word in return. But he wasn't finished. The smirk grew, feeding on the attention of the people who were now slowing down to watch. "Tell you what," he said, dripping sarcasm, "if you can get me out of this chair, if you can make me walk, I'll hand you $1 million right now. Before we continue, kindly tell us in the comments, what time is it where you're watching from? Also, don't forget to strike that like and subscribe button. Now let's get back to our story." Scattered chuckles rippled through the growing crowd. Some looked uncomfortable. Others found the spectacle amusing. A rich man taunting a poor child? What could she possibly do? The girl didn't flinch. No smile. No fear. She just stared at him with an expression so still it made the laughter around them fade. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but it cut straight through the noise. "A miracle isn't always what you expect, sir." Something in her tone made a few people shift uneasily. It wasn't childish. It wasn't timid. It felt like a truth she knew and no one else understood. The man raised a brow, forcing a laugh. "Oh really? And what do you think a miracle is? Some trick, a wish, $1's worth of belief?" He tried to keep his voice playful, but his eyes flickered. The girl's calm rattled him. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even blinking. The little girl reached beneath the stand with slow, careful movements. The crowd leaned in, expecting some silly toy, a gimmick, a childish prop to keep the act going. Instead, she placed a single folded sheet of paper on the counter. The corners were soft and tattered, the folds worn thin from being opened too many times. With gentle fingers, she nudged it toward him. He hesitated, then picked it up. The page shook just slightly between his hands as he unfolded it. Inside, written in uneven handwriting, were words carved deep into the paper. Desperate, messy, heartbreaking. "Dear God, please bring my mommy back. She got sick and went away. I don't care what I have to do. I just want one more hug." His grin collapsed. The laughter draining from the crowd dimmed until the street seemed to fall silent. Something in his chest tightened sharply as he stared at the child's plea. When he looked at her again, she was still watching him, face steady, eyes bright with unshed tears. "That was the first miracle I ever asked for," she whispered. "God never gave it to me, so I started giving miracles to other people instead. Maybe if I keep helping, maybe one day he'll listen." The man swallowed hard. For years he had lived inside his own bitterness, angry at the world, angry at his body, angry at the miracle he believed he'd never get. He had buried that hurt under wealth, under arrogance, under mocking people who dared to hope. And here she was, this tiny girl with no mother, no comfort, no safety, no reason to keep believing, still choosing faith over fear, still choosing hope. People shifted awkwardly. Some lowered their gaze, ashamed of their earlier laughter. The man tried to hold on to his pride, but the dam inside him finally broke. His fingers tightened around the paper until they turned white, and his eyes stung with tears he could no longer hide. The girl leaned forward just slightly and spoke in a voice meant only for him. "Sometimes, sir, the miracle isn't your legs. Sometimes it's learning how to stand up here." The paper shook between the man's fingers. He tried to summon a smirk, tried to brush it off as childish scribbles, but the weight of those words wouldn't let him. They dug into places he'd buried, ripping open memories he thought he had outgrown. His chest tightened, his breath uneven, and the more he fought it, the harder it pressed. The girl didn't move. Her small hands rested neatly on the countertop. She didn't question him or rush him or force a response. She simply let the moment sit, heavy, unspoken, like she understood he was wrestling with something far deeper than a note. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked like glass. You call this a miracle? A piece of paper? A wish no one ever answered." His eyes searched hers hopelessly, as though begging her to laugh, to tell him he was right, to give him permission to retreat back behind his usual shield of arrogance. But she only tilted her head, calm and honest. "I think the miracle is that I didn't disappear," she whispered. "Even when my mom never came back, I kept hoping. I kept asking. If I stop believing, then nothing matters. But if I keep going, maybe someone else will get the miracle I never got." Her words sliced through him. He remembered the man he once was, the one who could sprint without thinking, jump without fear, move through the world without ever imagining it could be taken from him. Then the accident, the pain, the stillness, the bitterness that grew louder than any prayer. He abandoned hope because it hurt too much. Mocking others was easier than admitting he wanted something impossible. Laughing at faith felt safer than confessing he missed the man he used to be. And now here she was, a child who had lost everything and somehow still held more hope than he'd ever carried. His gaze dropped to his hands gripping the wheelchair's armrests. His fingers trembled, knuckles paling as the truth finally reached the surface. His breath shuddered once, twice, and then the tears came, quiet, relentless, uncontrollable. Not from anger, not from shame, but from grief he had never allowed himself to feel. He cried for the life behind him, for the pride that had become its own prison, for the years he spent pretending he didn't care. And he cried because this small, fragile girl had reminded him of something he thought he'd lost forever. The realization that being broken didn't mean he was finished. The girl's face never shifted. She didn't look proud, didn't look victorious. She simply held his gaze with those deep, tired eyes, eyes that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd watched someone break open in front of her. Gently, she slid a small glass jar toward him. Inside were wrinkled dollars and scattered coins, tiny offerings from people who had bought their own small piece of hope. "You don't owe me $1,000,000, she murmured. "Just $1. His fingers trembled as he reached for his wallet. A man who could drop money without blinking now found himself struggling to remove a single note. When he finally placed the bill in the jar, his hand shook and a tear splashed against the counter. He lifted his head. Something about him had changed, like a weight he'd carried for years had cracked open. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was something honest and unguarded. "I don't know if I'll ever use these legs again," he said, voice trembling, "but you gave me back something I forgot I needed." The girl frowned slightly. "What's that?" "Hope," he breathed. Around them, the street had fallen silent. Some onlookers wiped at their eyes. Others pulled their kids closer. In a city full of noise, a strange stillness hovered over the moment, as if no one dared interrupt what had just happened. He pushed his wheelchair back slowly, his hands feeling unexpectedly lighter. His legs remained motionless, but something inside him felt like it had risen for the first time in years. As he turned to look at her one more time, he whispered, almost to himself, "You were right. Miracles don't always look the way we expect. Sometimes the miracle is remembering how to believe." As the man wheeled away, wiping his tears with the back of his hand, he carried something no wealth, no doctor, no success had ever given him. Not a cure for his legs, but a healing for his spirit. The crowd slowly scattered, some dropping coins into the jar, others touching the girl's shoulder gently as they walked by. But she stayed still, hands folded neatly, waiting for the next soul to come by. Not for tricks, not for games, but for the kind of miracle that only a child who refused to stop believing could give. If this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected stories. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from all of you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching.